Hi, welcome back to the channel. Hey, I want to talk today off topic of the normal issues that I generally talk about weightlifting and strength training. This has been a passion of mine for some years, particularly the last 10 years. Just wanted to give a little bit of a history and encourage those of you that are hard gainers. I was a very hard gainer, still am a hard gainer. I played football as a youth. That was up until about the 7th grade when my parents yanked me out of public school. Not only could I not do long division at the end of 6th grade, but I was getting in fights at school all the time. And I think they felt like a private Christian school might reform me. Actually, it basically did. But by the time I went into that school, I had to drop football, which was pretty, sad for me as a 6th grader, looking forward to playing at the junior high level. So I had to learn to play soccer. Played soccer all the way through school, 7th through 12th. Played basketball all the way through school. But never really lifted weights. Weightlifting was not really big in the late 70s, early 80s at the junior high and senior high level. Certainly wasn't big within my school, playing soccer and basketball. It was often believed that weightlifting would stunt your ability to play basketball well during that era. So it wasn't really encouraged. So I was like a 6'3" to 165 soaking wet. And even though I could leap, I could ball, y'all. I could dunk and all that kind of stuff. I was nowhere near good enough to play at a major, NCAA division school. You can be a big fish in a little pond, and then you get to a big pond and find out you're a little fish that can't dunk off the backboard like all the kids that you're watching in the gym as you get cut in the first 2 minutes of the college tryouts. Ooh, that's a different story. That'll teach you character. But weightlifting wasn't really big. Really, I started lifting weights while I was in college, my first 2 years down in Virginia at Liberty. They had a weightlifting class, and I took that class, learned a couple fundamentals about it. Didn't really stick. I lifted a little bit, not enough to really catch the bug, you know what I'm saying? But I was still, at that time, I always had a thick and strong lower body, but I was kind of wiry. It kind of runs in the genetics of my family. We're kind of wiry men, and muscular but wiry. And so that doesn't really translate well to weightlifting. When you're tall, you got long arms. My brother's taller than I am, and my father's a little bit shorter than me. So we're like 6'1", 6'3", and my brother's probably over 6'4". And his son's like taller than he is, so one of his sons. So anyway, fast forward, after college, I ended up going into law enforcement in the early 90s. Now, they did incorporate machine basically lifting in my police academy. That was kind of a new thing. They had just done away with boxing, which is a shame. I would have loved to have boxed. That would have been great cardio too. We ran a lot because our commandant loved to run. So we ran more than most any classes, I think, before us in the academy. But I had also just come off of a couple years in the Army Reserve. So I was in really peak shape of my life, running strength-wise. But again, just introducing more lifting. I think I might have done 225 for one, and by the time I got out of the police academy, I was 185. That's nowhere near as strong as you need to be if you're going to be wrestling around with people. And this was really before MMA or jiu-jitsu was a really big thing. We incorporated maybe a little Aikido in the academy. It's kind of judo moves, wrist locks, move to the body, do straight arm, bent arm takedowns. Nothing really. Again, I really regret not having that era that more modern law enforcement had, where Krav Maga came into play, and then obviously Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu took over everything. But we didn't have that, so we had to rely more on raw strength and kind of like body shifts and wrist locks, just sheer power. But I still felt like out on patrol, like there were people that could overpower me. And so I didn't want the average Joe on the street to be able to overpower me. So I started seriously working out, started taking creatine for the first time. I've taken creatine pretty much since the early 90s. I may even take it a little bit in the 80s, but didn't really take it for very long. Maybe you guys remember there was these white packets that had like amino acids in them. They were like horse pills, I call them. There'd be 6 or 7 in there. That's what we did in the 80s. We took amino acids. I don't know if those were even working. But anyway, fast forward to those 90s years, I went from basically 6'3", 185 to 6'3", 220. And basically it was all muscle. I was lifting all the time. First I was lifting in a little hotel gym. They let the cops lift in there for free. And then I transitioned to more like a regular gym. And some buddies and I would go in there and lift. And I remember at the time, maybe my max was 285 on the bench. And that, for me, who had been super wiry and skinny, that was a lot of weight, but nowhere near like real power. You know, until you get really 3 plates on both sides and you're lifting 315, when you're in the gym, when you're bench pressing, you don't really feel like you've achieved. And I don't mean to diminish anyone that hasn't reached that or has a lot lesser weight. I just know when you're comparing yourself to where power and strength comes from, you really start thinking about strength and power once you see 315 and the 345s on both sides, those Olympic weights, those silver weights. Oh, it's a beautiful thing. But it took, during those years, I didn't hit that goal. Maybe on the Smith machine, I didn't really count that, but on the flat bench, I didn't hit it. But I was working out and definitely felt that strength. I got in some scuffles on the job. I worked pretty much through the entire 90s. Felt like my strength didn't let me down. A little OC and power, that's all you needed back in those days. I didn't much care for the baton. I tried to use it once when we were arresting a logger, and it ended up underneath him. He grabbed it, and I just threatened to shoot him. So I didn't want to have that situation again. I typically left it in the car. So if you're not competent with the tool, you just shouldn't use it. And that was kind of like my thing. I just didn't get enough training to be fully competent. Some of the guys practice with it all the time. I didn't care about that. I could rely on my height and strength and basic intimidation, verbal judo in OC. That was about, all that I needed through most of my police career. Of course, you got your back up with a firearm. We didn't have tasers. But anyway, back to the weightlifting. After I left law enforcement in the early 2000s, for about 3 years there, I didn't lift at all. And then we relocated from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I lived on the West Coast out in California and got a job in the security industry because I was going through school, and they gave free tuition to folks that would work at their university in their safety department. And at the time, I was, again, kind of like jonesing to start working out again, even though I had a different kind of career trajectory at the time. I wanted to still be strong. That's always been a goal of mine in my life. And so I began working out again. This is, again, late 30s, early 40s, on again, off again. Just didn't really stick. I'd always end up hurting myself in the gym because I'd overdo it. I'd work out for 4 to 6 months and hurt myself and have to take like a month or two off and then just not get back to it. So just not consistent, didn't really gain the strength that I needed. And then at some point in my mid to late 40s to about 50, I just quit lifting. I mean, I got busy. I ended up getting the director job at the safety department. There's a lot of projects. There's a lot of things occupying my time. And I just, lifting weights, I wasn't working patrol shifts anymore per se. So, I sat more in the office. And then I kind of had a wake-up call. I think it was early 2016, maybe January 2016, we did a joint training exercise with another university safety team. We were using simunitions, which is like not real bullets, but they hurt. They hit you kind of like paintball, but different kind of level. And we were in all the gear and everything, and we were doing kind of a bounding overwatch where somebody would cover you and then you'd sprint to a cover and cover them. And while I was running from one cover to another, I like pulled a hamstring just running across the parking lot. And I realized I'm like about 260 and not in shape. What am I doing? And I'm working this job. What if someone's life needs to depend on me? And so it was kind of a wake-up call for me that I had let myself kind of get lazy. I mean, I wouldn't have looked fat because when you're a big guy, you can hide 255, 260, but I was not happy with my performance. And so I remember hitting the gym with a vengeance, and really spring 2016 to now, 10 years, I've been very consistent. And when you're really consistent, and hear me if you guys that are hard gainers, when you're really consistent, you can really achieve a lot. And so at first I was doing all the traditional exercises I had done as a man in my 20s and 30s, early 40s. And quickly my joints, and especially my shoulders, let me know I couldn't do those kind of exercises without a great deal of pain. I'd had a motorcycle accident in the mid 2014, and I had separated my shoulder going too fast up above the hills in Malibu on my motorcycle. I was pretty much a novice at the time and was not really being stupid, just going a little too hot into a curve and low-sided my shoulder. And I was wearing armor and helmet and everything, but I still separated my shoulder. And so I always had a little bit of a bug shoulder since then. And so when I was lifting, I ended up having a partial tear in my shoulder, and I really never took any time off. It hurt. I just tried to work around it and modify my exercises, but I quickly learned 2016, 17, 18, I hit 315 around 2018, but I couldn't do flat bench anymore. I was starting to realize that it hurt too much. I couldn't do all heavy shoulder work like barbell, shoulder presses. I used to love those as a younger man. And I could still do, obviously, all the arm work, curls, tricep. I could lay on the floor and do dumbbell bench presses. And so what I realized I could do is decline barbell, and I could still continue to lift heavy. And so that's kind of why I transitioned to barbell on my little app that I use called Gravitas. I'm Mr. Decline because I pretty much only decline and work arms now. If you were to track my workouts for the last 3-4 years, they're like decline barbell, decline dumbbell for arms, and that's about it. But I was able to hit that 315, and then I thought, okay, I'm a hard gainer. I was able to hit 315. What if I could hit 405? And after a number of years, I ended up hitting 405 at the end of 2022, and that was a really good feeling. So when you're a hard gainer that could really not even really bench press your body weight getting out of high school and could barely bench press 1.25, in my early 20s until I started seriously working out, that seemed like a real achievement. So, of course, I'm nearing 60, I'll be 60 this year. So it was like I was almost 50. I was 57, I think, when I hit that. But I say this to you older men that work out too. Don't be afraid to adjust to an exercise, especially if you like to lift heavy, that allows you to still lift heavy, but doesn't stress the supporting muscles that really can hurt you and slow you down. So I found I could do decline because when coming down like this and pressing up at that decline angle didn't put all the stress on my shoulder. Just doing that hurts my shoulders actually, because I was worked out day before yesterday. So anyway, I would just really encourage those of you that do want to continue to lift. If you're consistent, week in, week out, grinding it out, and do progressive overload, and for me, creatine was a big help for energy, you will eventually hit goals that you didn't think possible. I never would have thought possible I could have hit 405. Now I've considerably come back down to maybe 350. I hurt myself really bad in November. I had to take a couple months off. I tried to go from Planet Fitness, Smith Machine, back to free weights and tweak my back and thought I was done lifting heavy. I don't know. I thought I might have seriously done something, but after 2 months of recovery, I've been back since January, and my strength levels aren't back up where I want, but I can still hit 350 for a 2, like on the Smith or whatever, like real fit 350. So that's enough. I think ego can get in the way too of telling you your body isn't really ready to do the heavy lifting you used to do. But I just want to encourage you that if you stick with your goals and you're persistent, you can achieve more than you thought you could. And so I'm in there every week, once, sometimes twice if I'm lucky now. I have asthma, pretty serious, so it takes me a long time between sets to rest and recover. I can still push heavy, then I have to give myself a break as long as I don't try to do too many reps at one time. But that's about all I wanted to talk about, is just to encourage you guys who are weightlifters, who are strength trainers, who get old. I hope to continue to lift heavy into my 60s, if the Lord is gracious. I have this little routine where I prepare my nerves really for a heavy lift, where I'll snap my bands and say a prayer to the Lord to help me. This might sound silly to some of you. Pray for the strength of Samson and the heart of David on every heavy lift, and then I'll snap another band and pray for my son who doesn't know the Lord and his girlfriend, and for his salvation. I want him to come to Christ. And just little things that I do that kind of get me in the zone, and then I might put a little soft metal, good lyrics metal in my ear, and then hit that hard as I can, and then prepare my mind to swap out of that and rest for a little while. So that's also something I think that's important, is preparing your body and your mind for a heavy lift. I know you guys that do squats and deadlifts know what I'm talking about. Even on decline bench when I'm doing that. I'm not messing around talking to my buddies. When I get to the heavy weights, I'm in a championship mindset. I need to get these done. And I've always been a competitor and an athlete, even as an older man. When I can't do a lot of the exercises I used to do, the fire never goes away, even though strength starts to fail you. And I'm sure that's going to continue as I get older. But so I encourage you to work on little routines. These aren't superstitious things. These are just things that you do that kind of get your body and mind ready to hit that maximum power. And that's just another little tip for you, along with choosing the right music for the right moment, for the right lift. And anyway, that's all I wanted to share. I hope that was helpful for some of you guys and you liked a little bit of the distraction from the normal stuff. Till next time, y'all take care.